Welcome to this edition of Fuel for Thought. I'm Mark Rechtin, Executive Editor of S&P Global Mobility. Automotive advertising and marketing has a long and storied history, from Standard of the World and Somewhere West of Laramie to the Ultimate Driving Machine and Zoom Zoom. But with new electric vehicle nameplates arriving by the dozens in just a few short years, it's going to take a bit more than unpimping the auto to generate interest in vehicles that people don't know much about. It won't matter if the vehicle comes from a legacy internal combustion brand, an EV disruptor, or even a new player from mainland China. There's going to be a dogfight over brand recognition, product awareness, and market share. Even Elon Musk, who swore Tesla would never need to advertise, is walking back his bold claim. Already, automotive budgets are stretched thin between reaching out to consumers via long-established communications forums and newer digital marketing channels. Suddenly grow the industry's product portfolio by a couple hundred new electric nameplates while still keeping people interested in your internal combustion portfolio as it winds down, and you have a real marketing challenge on your hands. Joining us today to discuss this quandary are two subject matter experts from S&P Global Mobility, Joe Kyriakoza, Vice President and General Manager of Polk Automotive Solutions, and Jason Jordhamo, Product Management Director. Good day to you both. I'll open the floor to Joe. There's been lots of discussion about the transformation of the auto industry from internal combustion to battery electric, but much of it has revolved around the engineering challenges: building a better battery, engineering the skateboard platform, developing an operable charging network, those sorts of things. But how are the OEMs and their agencies going to be able to navigate the marketing side of things? It was one thing when General Motors launched the EV1 and it was this unique thing that blew people's minds. But what happens when everyone has an EV, or 4, or 6, in their product line? Now what? How does an OEM navigate marketing an entirely new powertrain technology when everyone else is as well?
I mean, this is a substantial challenge at a minimum. It represents a very different problem than historically what OEMs have dealt with in terms of positioning their vehicles, marketing and branding themselves, being able to really leverage big, splashy advertising opportunities in a way that just sort of gives a cascading halo effect for themselves. We're in a mode of real education and trying to really get consumers to think about and change the way they think about buying cars. And this is step function change that not only is for the consumer, but for the marketing strategy for OEMs. And I kind of think of it as a multi-step approach that's going to evolve. I can give you 5 steps right now that they should be thinking about. And first and foremost is education. Consumers need to understand, what are they getting themselves into with EVs? Why should I consider one? What are the things that it's doing for me as a consumer? Am I excited about not ever having to go to a gas station or get an oil change or a transmission check? Those types of things have not been really part of the messaging strategy for OEMs, and that needs to be part of it. In addition to, I'd say the second step is just, how do we mitigate this range anxiety issue? For most people, a charge at the home is more than enough to get them through the day-to-day driving, but people still have that thought that if I want to take a road trip, what do I do? So there's got to be an education through marketing around that as well, and the confidence that they'll be fine. I'd say the third step is differentiation, right? So with all these vehicles and all these makes and models that are going to be out there and the nameplates, how do you differentiate? What are the things that are different? If the powertrains all kind of look and sound and move the same, what's the real deal here? Is it the interior, the exterior, the look and feel, some of the technology advancements? And you got to have that differentiation kind of built in with a long-term vision. So the consumer, you got to get the consumer excited about, and this is the next phase of this vehicle, or these are the software upgrades we're going to make over the next, X number of months, years, et cetera. So differentiation with a long-term vision is also very important. The fourth is experiential. So being able to give people a real experience with the vehicle. Auto shows have become kind of passé lately. They're not really a thing that a lot of consumers are attending. So how do you meet the consumer where they are? You see brands like Tesla going into malls and storefronts where they want you to kind of look in the vehicle, go inside of it, but also just being able to give people a chance to drive these things. It's got to be experiential from an investment standpoint. And then I'd say the fifth step, and again, this is just like the very beginning stages of everything, of many more steps. But the fifth step is data-driven marketing to really understand who's actually going to be likely to buy an EV and really change the way they've bought historically. You can't just target Tesla owners. You got to go after the next group in order to create more of a mass market appeal. So who are the next people that are stepping up and stepping into moving from an ICE vehicle to an EV? So this is really just a very different marketing strategy that is going to require thinking different, like the old Apple adage, right? So it's a big step.
Let's flip this to Jason. There's going to be a glide path of uncertain slope and duration for the internal combustion vehicle into the next decade. For instance, Toyota has, I believe, 17 internal combustion vehicles with numerous variants in their lineup, and the picture is the same for any full-line manufacturer. Those vehicles have amortization schedules that require them to be built and marketed for quite a while longer for them to be profitable. If you were a VP of marketing for Toyota or Ford or Mercedes, how do you decide how to split up your marketing budget between ICE and BEV? And oh yeah, don't forget hybrids either.
You mentioned three significant brands, and depending on which one I was the VP of marketing of, I'd have a slightly different answer and approach. I think with Mercedes, a little bit more sense of urgency there because of the luxury market and what Tesla is doing in the luxury market. They've got the highest brand loyalty. They're growing in share consistently, and they're also, additive vehicles that are coming in and kind of nudging into the driveways and into the loyalty of these households. Toyota is taking a much more deliberate approach, and Ford has been a little bit more forward, comparing the two, obviously, and how they're rolling out their models. But I think, VP marketing in those places, they have business decisions that they need to take a look at from a profitability and a production standpoint. And I would really kind of like in the short term, really hone in on my inventory and where things are and really take a look at things at a regional basis because, the data that we're seeing, EV adoption and charging deserts and things like that are going to play a significant role in how this kind of rolls out in these fragmented steps based on infrastructure, based on affordability and things like that. So those are all things that I'd be swirling around in my head and I'd be kind of like wanting to match the where my inventory concerns are, and I'm not thinking only about EV. I think that the ICE models and hybrid, I mean, the 80+% of the market right now, I have to have targeted opportunities around reaching those buyers and those households, keeping the EV brand halo there. But I'm looking at where my inventory is short term, and then long term, I think there needs to be kind of like an allocation correction during the big constrained market, a lot of vehicles to sell. So messaging was, focused on EV credentials and establishing those. And as a result, their spend was a little bit higher than what or noticeably higher than what the actual sales volume was. So I think that there's going to be a little bit of a correction there across the board for all those types of OEMs.
Sticking with Jason, given that EVs are a new product category, we're seeing that legacy automakers can't even count on loyal customers sticking around. According to S&P Global Mobility analysis of loyalty data, we've seen Tesla siphon off hundreds of thousands of customers from brands where people had been repeat buyers for decades. What can legacy automakers do to counter this trend?
It's a great story, right? Their loyalty numbers, their conquesting ratios, what they're doing in that space is you have to watch it. You have to be aware of it, and hopefully try to mirror that success as best as you can. I think it really starts with first party data for everyone, right? Understanding your CRM and how fortified is it, how up to date and how current it is. EVs are largely an additive purchase, right? So they're joining something else in the driveway. If I am a Honda, a Toyota, a Ford, OEM and I want to know, are my vehicles sharing the driveways with Teslas or with other vehicles? So fortifying and enhancing your first party data and really understanding your customers, who they are beyond just your initial vehicle purchase is going to be like not just hugely important, but almost base table stakes now, and how you can kind of grow that first party as that very valuable asset and part of your marketing approach is going to be job one. I think we see some interesting things with loyalty to the EV, I guess, powertrain. There's a lot of, outside of Tesla, there's really been kind of people coming in and going out. So I'm looking at hybrid as a potential transition vehicle, right? If someone who's not having a great experience with an EV and they're returning to market, but they don't necessarily want to move to ICE, plug-in hybrid could be a place, right? And same from those that are going in the other direction. So that's a place I'm going to be really exploring as well as this transition takes place, because in about 5 or 6 years, we're going to have roughly parity in powertrain sales, right? So there'll be about a third hybrid, about a third EV, and about a third ICE in about 5 or 6 years. That's going to be how those products are going to be rolling out and the sales are going to be rolling out. So 3 different types of buyers, 3 different types of buying motivations. And really, that's what I'm trying to prepare myself for right now. Leasing has plummeted over the past few years. I think in 2018, it was about 30% of new vehicle sales were done through leasing. Now it's below 18% in 2023. That's about 1.5 million fewer drivers who are regularly returning to market, and that's obviously impacting the CPO market as well. And leasing and CPO customers are the most loyal that are out there, right? So they're significantly higher to return to market and get the same make or model coming off that lease or coming off that CPO. Well, that loyalty surge, right, is gone. There's a vacuum there right now. So I'm concentrating on trying to improve my leasing numbers so I can have better customer touch points and better opportunity to keep them returning to market and being loyal to me and my brands.
Back to Joe. Let's talk about disruptor brands, those automakers who are all EV all the time. They don't have to worry about internal combustion glide paths, but they do have to worry about budget and scale, because other than Tesla, none of them sell EVs in any sort of mass quantity, at least not yet. And it's a chicken and egg situation for the likes of Rivian and Lucid and Fisker and even Polestar, even though it's a cousin company to Volvo and owned by the giant mainland Chinese automaker Geely. You need volume to generate revenue to afford a big marketing budget to go up against the big legacy players. But until you get the word out to a mass audience, not enough people know who you are. They don't trust the brand, etc., etc.
This is an interesting opportunity for disruptor brands because they've had a bit of a runway where many of the mainstream OEMs have been slower to market to bring in more EVs. And the interesting opportunity for them is, what these brands are is they're direct-to-consumer brands, right? They sell a vehicle typically not through a dealership network. They're selling it through a website. And that is obviously a very different experience for most consumers unless they've bought a Tesla. Direct-to-consumer brands, there are many of them that we all know very well that have been very successful being these digitally native companies. You've heard of companies like Casper or Warby Parker, Allbirds, Dollar Shave Club, Chewy Pet Supplies. And of course, Tesla is basically the first D2C auto brand that has figured out how to navigate around the traditional retail model to connect with consumers. And by the way, doing it with zero marketing dollars by and large. So there's an approach here. But again, with the proliferation of vehicles that are coming to market from the mainstream OEMs over the next few years that are going to be EVs, the disruptors are going to it's going to get very crowded for them. In general, like how we should be thinking about marketing in a very crowded space, data-driven marketing is really important. Data collection, right? So D2C brands, many of the D2C brands I mentioned, they built their businesses on collecting data from consumers through different means, getting them to subscribe to something, to sign up for something. They built their brands, they built their businesses this way. These companies have to do the same. They have to create a subset of consumers that are advocates and people who are first movers to their brands. In addition, the experiential piece, they've got to be able to meet consumers where they are, and they got to understand the target markets that matter to them. So by doing the inherent research that comes with that, you're able to hopefully get in front of consumers where they can experience your vehicle, give them an opportunity to test drive or look, kick the tires, get in the vehicle and look more closely at it and get excited about it. The other piece from a marketing standpoint is really influencer. So you've got to be able to find the people through social media channels, the now kind of proliferated influencer marketing, where you can create kind of a viral effect for your brand and your vehicle. So there's a lot of opportunities to do that through influencers in that social space. And again, that's less expensive than big splashy marketing. Also partnerships, partnerships that are relevant with relevant and adjacent companies So if you're trying to position yourself as cutting edge and tech driven or earthy and climate driven, there are other companies and other industries that you can partner with to help be a part of that same message and be able to connect to those same customers that they might have that have adjacent thoughts and feelings about potentially their next vehicle purchase. And then, the cool factor has to be a thing, right? Tesla launched with a sports car in the very beginning, the Roadster. So now the Roadster is not even, what people talk about when they think of Tesla, but they started by creating this halo vehicle that created this cool factor that allowed them to sort of set a vision for electrified marketing. Again, electrified vehicles, again, without a lot of marketing behind it. So being able to kind of put those pieces together and put a plan together that allows you to do it within the constraints of a small startup company, really there's a lot of threading the needle with that kind of marketing, but data can help make this a lot more efficient.
So I mentioned Geely, which opens the door to discussing mainland China, where there are literally dozens of electric vehicle manufacturers, some of which are very good and definitely have their eyes set on international expansion. Could these mainland Chinese brands follow the recipe created by Japan and then Korea in entering the North American and European markets? Initially cheap and cheerful cars, or at least having a price advantage in taking on established automakers, but then becoming recognized successful players? What happens when the mainland Chinese brands arrive and create even more noise in the market?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's going to happen, right? So there's a history of this. In the 60s and 70s, it was Toyota that came in with entry-level vehicles. A few decades after that, it was South Korea with Hyundai and Kia, again, coming in at entry level and kind of filling a void that was not being served by a lot of the established players that were out there. And then, through these entry-level vehicles, kind of growing their models and being able to service. And you take a look at, what Toyota and Hyundai are now, big mainstream brands. When this happens with China, they're going to fill a void in the EV space because there really aren't that many entry-level options in the EV space right now. And they're very expensive. And China's going to have that advantage in being able to produce those at a more cost-efficient way than others. Not to mention, there are huge advantages in mining and materials that are right there within their country, right? When you think about all the elements that are going into EV and those minerals and the fact that so much of that is coming out of China as well. But there's another thing that's going to happen too, which is the data privacy bells are going to go off, right? If we think about what just happened with TikTok and that scenario, well, now we're going to be talking about these basically mobility data centers that you're going to be driving around, collecting all of this information, and your phone's going to be plugged into it on top of that. So that's going to be coming into the forefront as well as those new models kind of come in. But yeah, that's going to come.
Okay, it's time for the lightning round. Jason, you are the Chief Marketing Officer of a big legacy automaker. How quickly do you swing the majority of your marketing spend to battery electric, even if it's not the majority of your sales?
I'm going to probably do a little the opposite. I think that there's been too much of a swing. I mean, obviously it depends on what brand I'm with, right? But in general, I think there's been a little bit too much of a swing to that side as a result of the constrained market, as a result of the push behind being one of the first players out into the EV space to kind of, challenge Tesla and others. So I'm looking a little bit more at a course correction from where I'm budgeting, and I'm going to be getting really smart with my inventory and my regional areas, and then have to lean into addressable targeting and data strategies to show me where I can invest the most effectively and the most efficiently. There's going to be a 30% increase roughly in a number of models by the end of this decade. More customers. Actually, same amount of customers, just more models to choose from and different powertrains and different styles. So I have to be very efficient and focused with my messaging and to target the households that make the most sense. We know that there's roughly 40% of the U.S. households that regularly buy new vehicles. There's another 50 million households that don't buy vehicles at all. Right. So where am I going to be putting my impressions and where am I going to be putting my messaging? And I want to kind of focus on that. There's 12 million homes that are 18 to 44-year-olds with 100K plus income, really valuable households. There are also 12 million homes that buy CUVs. Right. One of them is going to give me a lot better potential than just going on a demographic basis. So I'm going to be looking at that across the board as well.
Now it's Joe's turn in the hot seat. You're the Chief Marketing Officer of a small disruptor EV brand with big volume ambitions. How do you convince your CEO, who is a pragmatic engineer by trade, that you need to spend $250 million in marketing budget to launch the brand sufficiently to even stand a chance of getting any consumer interest?
To be honest, my answer is to convince the CEO of the opposite. Spend less, more targeted and segmented, pragmatic growth in a very noisy and crowded market. I mean, the strategy in my mind, if I'm one of these brands, is let the mainstream OEMs fund the education of consumers and the mainstreaming of EVs, because they will have the deep pockets to do that. And then you kind of come in from the backside and really bring in, the cool factor of your brand being new and different and differentiated, again, through the tactics I talked about earlier, like data-driven marketing, data collection, the way that the D2C companies have perfected data collection and remarketing, as well as that grassroots influencer opportunity to really start to use people who have large swaths of people that follow them to really help distribute the value of your brand. So own your niche and do a lot of testing and learning, and that way you don't have to buy a Super Bowl ad that's really going to end up being very wasteful. So that's really what I would rather see done than try to convince one of these brands to spend $250 million in marketing and then crash and burn.
All right. Obviously, we have just scratched the surface of this issue, and our experts could delve much deeper into the challenges and opportunities facing marketers as the world crosses the chasm into mainstream EV adoption. But our time is up. Thanks to our experts for joining us today, and thanks to you for listening. That was a lot to unpack, but I hope you all feel smarter and more informed for having tuned in. And if so, please share this podcast link with your colleagues and in your social media accounts. To read the article that accompanies this podcast, entitled Too Many Toys on the Shelf, as well as to opt in to our newsletter that provides more information on this topic and others, please visit spglobal.com/mobility. And if you want to learn more about anything else under the automotive sun, please feel free to reach out to us at that same web address. We'll be back with more fuel for thought next month.